Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony Lamontagna, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zagi Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Canada podcast, with workplace mental health becoming a priority for businesses who want to retain staff and prevent burnout. This is the source of information for creating sustainable and psychologically healthy workplaces in Canada.
Welcome to the Psych Health and Safety podcast in Canada. My name is Ian Lewis, and I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, and this podcast airs on YouTube. We've put clips on LinkedIn, and it's recorded on audio version. For those of you who are listening into the audio version today, we have 4 screens going. For those of you on YouTube, this might look like, oh, we got an expanded panel here. And I am really thankful to have a wonderful panel of guests today with us, and we're going to be able to have a special treat. Quite often in the podcasts, we are just talking with one individual, and we're talking about their work that they do. But today we have a great privilege of talking with YMCA Workwell, so 2 of their folks, and one of their organizational clients who has come to talk about the work that they've been doing together. So without further ado, we're going to go around and we're going to do some introductions. And so first of all, I'm going to pass the ball over to Kate Toth. And Kate, why don't you share with us a little bit about how you became involved with Workwell and some of your history and some of your passion for this area?
Sure. Thank you so much, Ian. So I joined Workwell 3 years ago. I am the Director of Strategic Wellbeing Services there. And really that means I am responsible for the action side of the business. So at Workwell, we're all about taking insights. We're very much evidence informed. And we then want to take that and help organizations put that on the ground in a meaningful way and make meaningful change for positive impact inside their organizations. And so I lead our action team. So I'll probably refer to it a little bit more that way. So prior to that, I was a professor of human resources for almost a decade. And prior to that, human resources manager in a variety of different areas. And so the common thread as I look back over now a 25-year career, which feels like I couldn't possibly be that old, but is really about creating great places to work. And so whether that's teaching the next generation of HR professionals or whether it's now working with what we call our partners across a variety of industries, we really are passionate, and I really am passionate about creating great places to work.
That's great. Thank you. Kyle, what's a bit of your background and how you came to be with Workwell?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ian. So I am relatively new with the Workwell team. This is week 3, so I can't possibly say that I've had a employer before. We're week 3. I'm part of a podcast. My first day was the day of the eclipse, so it's been an eventful few weeks here, to say the least. I'm the manager of strategic wellbeing services with Workwell. I'm working directly for Kate, which is an absolute joy. I bring with me 10 years of experience in workplace health and well-being from the higher education sector. So working specifically in-house with faculties and departments and teams to build out their own overall health and well-being, coaching their leaders, but also doing some more institutional programming as well. The coaching, mentoring component, the building of programming components, some of my favorite components of that particular role. So when I found one that focused specifically on that within the Workwell team, I had to jump all over it. So, and as they say, the rest is history.
Wow. Okay. So some real background in HR, actually working frontline, getting lots of stuff done, lots of management experience, lots of sometimes seeing, I'm going to guess, some messy stuff, some stuff that's not really ideal.
Most certainly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The common thread throughout, though, is a desire to improve and a desire to grow and learn and develop. So that is definitely where the action side of Workwell can come in as one of the true leaders to help folks through that.
That's great. And so, Christine, tell me a little bit about where you come from and what your present role is then, and
Thanks,
how you
Ian.
got hooked up with these guys.
I know, absolutely. I've been so fortunate to be working with YMCA Workwell and specifically Kate since 2021. So quite a bit of history there with the team. I'm the Director of Operations at Rising Oaks Early Learning. I've been here for 34 years. I've got you beat there, Kate. I'm also a registered early childhood educator. And so, in addition to having my early childhood education background, I also went back to school for some lifelong learning and obtained my HR training, my human resources training. So, sort of creating a little bit of my own career there, my own career path in combining early childhood education and HR. I guess for me, we began this work with YMCA Workwell and Kate to enhance our flourishing team here at Rising Oaks Early Learning as part of our strategic plan. And in recent days, I've sort of been talking about the legacy that I want to leave, and that is that I want to see that early childhood education is a flourishing profession, a healthy profession, a resilient profession, and know that that we're setting a healthy foundation for children.
Wow. Okay. We have a lot of passion in the room. And that is awesome, because what we want to be able to do on this podcast is to help our listeners and our viewers see that psychological health and safety, helping create flourishing workplaces, creating places where people love to work and it's very healthy to work, is actually not that hard. And there's the layers of complexity, we can build them on, but we want to get the word out there. So thanks so much for joining us, Christine. And so, Kate and Kyle, maybe tell us a little bit about YMCA Workwell, how this became part of a not-for-profit. Like, maybe just orient our listeners a little bit, because you are not one of the big consulting firms. You're not McKinsey. You're not Deloitte. But what are you guys about? What are you doing?
Yeah, so that is one of the things that I love so much about YMCA Workwell. So we are part of the YMCA Three Rivers, which is located in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, Stratford, Perth area in Ontario. We joined the YMCA and created YMCA Workwell just shy of 4 years ago now. So right at sort of that start of the pandemic, just as it was kicking off in 2020. And the idea was that, the Y has been creating healthy communities for a very long time, but always in sort of that one-to-one relationship. And so there was a group of people who had this idea that maybe the Y could expand that focus on healthy communities into the workplace. And so that's how YMCA Workwell was born. So we are a business to business consulting branch of the YMCA Three Rivers. And we're a social enterprise, which means that when you pay your fees to us for the work that we do, that goes back into the Y to support community programming. And so we're really proud of that fact. That we are about giving back into our communities, as well as reaching out and really helping our partners to create great places to work. So we think it's a win-win situation.
Right, and so win-win situation, creating better communities through better workplaces, certainly aligns with UN Social Development Goals. So do you restrict your practice to any particular organizations, or anyone is welcome?
Anyone is welcome. So we do a lot of work for not-for-profit, but not exclusively. We are working into many different industries. And basically what we're looking for is an organization that recognizes that they want and need to make a change. And if they're ready to go, we're ready to support them.
Wow. All right. So, as always, when I'm speaking with interesting guests, my mind goes in lots of different directions. So, do you think that because you're not for profit and some of these organizations you work with are not for profit, that they wouldn't have been able to access something like this on their own if YMCA didn't exist?
Well, I think that's a key part of it, right? I mean, traditionally, consulting services like these are very expensive. And so part of what we want to do is to make that accessible. And I think we also bring, because we're part of a not for profit, we bring that understanding when we come into those organizations about the unique challenges that the not for profit sector faces.
Right. Okay. So, as you approach an organization, then, where do you start? What do you do?
Yeah, well, we've been fortunate enough as we've been growing that organizations are approaching us oftentimes, right? Which is such a great place to start because they've heard that we're doing something different, either through a wonderful partner who is, singing about the work that they're doing, like Christine, or others, and um, recognizing that we're doing something a little bit different. We do have a really unique focus on employee well-being. That is the heart of why we do the work it is that we do. And as I mentioned earlier, we're all about insights to action, right? So we like to start off with data. And so when an organization comes to us and wants to work with us, we usually start off with what we call our insights survey. And that measures engagement, organizational culture, well-being, and performance. And we get a really good sense of how it is that the employees inside the organization are doing. And that allows us to work with our partners leadership team to decide, where do we want to take action first? Where is it going to have the greatest impact? Because it can be overwhelming to think about, there's a lot of data. What do I do first? And if I try to do everything, I'm not likely going to be successful, right? So how do we narrow in on those one or two things to start with, do a really good job of those, and then measure again and continue the work? So it really is, it's a cycle and it's a journey. As Christine mentioned, we've been working together since the fall of 2021, and it's been a wonderful journey, and one that we hope to continue long into the future. Because we grow to care so very deeply about our partners and their teams.
Right. Okay. Wow, that's a great high level overview. Now, Kyle, in your introduction, and Kate, you've both talked about employee well being. What is employee well being? Like, it's kind of a fuzzy term. I know there's lots of definitions out there, but how do you guys sort of think about employee well being?
Yeah, so we will talk about the distinction between wellness and well-being at Workwell a lot, right? So there are very many organizations that are doing a lot around wellness. So those would be things like having an EFAP in place, an employee assistance program, right? They're maybe doing lunchtime yoga, throwing pizza parties. Christine, we were joking about that earlier this week, right? Um, there are meditation apps, there are fitness programs, fitness memberships, benefits. There's all of these things that are very important around wellness. But when the conversation stops there, that's where we've got a bit of an issue inside our organizations, because well-being is that sort of broader piece where what we do inside the organization, the employee doesn't need to step in and do something different. It's about the way that we set up the organization itself. So when you think about those wellness offerings that I was talking about, the employee needs to go. They need to pick up the phone, and they need to go to the class. They need to download the app and use it. Those are important pieces to support their own well-being. But from an organizational standpoint, it's really about thinking about the way that work influences well-being on a day-to-day basis, whether that is in the culture that it sets up, in the way that it trains its leaders to create great teams and experiences, and the policies and practices that support the employees and how they interact with that when they show up every day.
Right. So you talked about the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
No, I was going to say to add on to that as well. In my experience, I've seen sort of that blurred line between excuse me, wellness and well-being, and it's sort of being seen as almost like a checkbox, right? I've done A through Z. I have done wellness. I have done well-being. We should be well now. instead of looking at it as more of a fluid, ongoing process, looking at well-being on a continuum of just as easy as it can improve in some facets. If it's not continuously worked on, it can go in the other direction as well. And we often can see that with some of our partners, that it is not always a linear direction, right? So making that distinction as well, within our definitions of well-being, I think would be important to discuss as well.
Right. So, but when you are talking about employee well-being, are you talking about measuring psychological distress? Are you asking if they're eating their fruits and vegetables? Like, are you like seeing how heavy they can lift? Can you bench press a 6-year-old? Like, what is employee well-being then? Because you measure it.
We do measure it. And of course, there are so many different things that you could measure, and we can't measure them all. We're really focused on creating data tools that allow employees to respond quickly, but still give us meaningful data. So we're always balancing the number of questions that we're asking versus the value of that data. We really think about well-being in a number of different ways. We measure well-being directly. Ask people, how would you reflect on your well-being? And it's not limited to a work context, because of course we're all human beings and we're whole people, and we don't, park half of ourselves outside before we come into work every day. So our well-being in the way that we show up at work every day really matters. We look at things like authenticity, workload, stress management. Those would all be some of the framework that we would use to make up our well-being driver in our tool.
So you have some questions then that are both sort of assessing self-perceived well-being, but then also how they perceive workload and engagement and other factors in there.
That's right.
Okay, but then you also said you're measuring performance. What would you be like? Are you measuring, interactions per hour with children, or are you like, how do you measure performance? Because obviously you're working in lots of different environments.
Yeah, so we look at a self-rated measure of performance. We ask people about, do they have what they need to do their jobs every day? So that's a little bit around those resources piece, that allows people to perform well. And then also, how well do they feel like the organization is delivering on its mission? So those are sort of the two pieces that we really look at around that performance piece. Interestingly for us, so we said we measure engagement, culture, well-being, performance, right? So we're measuring across sort of 4 different dimensions. For us, both engagement and performance are outcome measures, right? And so what we're really, really paying attention to are those organizational culture and well-being pieces. Because if I show up each day and I'm well, and I show up each day to a place that allows me to flourish and thrive, then engagement is going to follow along with that. Performance is going to follow along with that. And so I think that's a really key piece about how we view the work that it is that we do.
So you talked about trying to keep a fairly narrow data set and not ask people to fill out, 200 questions. What would be a typical survey? Is there sort of a range of a number of questions, like once you're in an organization?
Yeah, so our standard insights would be somewhere in the area of 20 questions. So it's 3 to 5 minutes to complete. It's very quick. And if you had asked me before I joined this organization as an HR professional, if I could have gotten really great data out of 20 questions, a 3 to 5 minute survey, I would have said, And yet I see the power of this every single day in terms of what we're able to help organizations understand about the experience of their employees. And so that piece is really something that I love about the work that I get to do every day. We do have some add-ons where we can look at demographics, for example. So there's been a lot of work, obviously, around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so some organizations also want to measure that along with their insights. We have a burnout module specifically that Christine and her team have been using since, the spring of 2022. And so time after time, taking a look at how that data is shifting. So in that case, the survey might grow a little bit, but at no point do we hit that, 50, 100, 200 question. We don't come anywhere near it.
Wow. Okay. So as you ask these questions, then what do you start to see? Like, how do you help organizations understand the data? Because you're getting 20 answers, maybe 30, depending if you have extra modules on there. But what do you start to find?
Really depends on the organization. And I think that, our work is very much tailored and customized to the particular partner and what their experiences are leading us to. We do lean in more heavily to those organizational culture and well-being measures first, because we do believe that that's where, as you start to have an intervention and you start to see change, that helps to bring the entire organizational experience up. Gosh, there are some things, like some key things that we find often over time, right? One of the things that we measure is around recognition and feeling valued. This is such a key piece around an employee's experience. Do they feel like they're a cog in the wheel, or do they feel like they really matter, both in terms of what they bring to the organization, but also who they are as they show up? And so in many cases, we find that those recognition and feeling valued scores might be a bit low. And that's such a great way to lean in and have some pretty quick wins, actually, because it doesn't cost a ton of money, or you don't need to stage a massive intervention to increase appreciation. And that's one of the areas that Christine and her team have been working on, and they've had some great success in terms of what it is that they've been doing there. We see well-being under pressure. We started measuring well-being before the pandemic and have continued to measure it going forward. And we haven't seen well-being fully rebound. And I think that's the other really key piece. We talk about employees, when they're showing up to work, they're maybe not feeling their best. And then if their work culture is adding negative stress rather than supporting them, then it's not a wonder that people are struggling. Right? And when you think about everything that's going on out in the world, there's a lot of pressures right now. We don't want work to be an added pressure. We actually want work to help people feel fulfilled, that they're achieving a sense of purpose, that they do the thing that they do best every day, and that they go home at least as healthy, if not healthier, than when they show up.
That's right, because work can be an incredible source of health and confidence building. That's why it's one of the social development goals. So sort of curious though, so when you get survey data back and you can make some assumptions of what that data is saying, but do you then engage on a deeper level with people to help contextualize that? Like, what does that look like? Because employees have filled out a survey, you've got some data, you see that, things are up or down, or you see a scatter plot of whatever. How do you make sense of that? How do you contextualize it then?
Yeah, that's where our partners are so important, right? Because they know their organizations way better than we ever will. And so we talk about our data being a point in time. It's a snapshot, right? And so based on, that sort of 2 or 3 week period that employees are filling out that survey, their experiences in that time are going to shape what it is that they're sharing. And so understanding that context from our partners' perspective is really important to help us interpret that data together and then say, what might we do to help improve this experience? Where are our strengths, and how can we continue to leverage those?
Right. Okay. So this is where now I'm going to put you on the spot, Christine. And this is the report card. This is the actual. Did it really turn out like Kate is saying it would? Like, so as the organization, Christine, when you've been a part of this and having surveys and digesting surveys, what's the viewpoint from you as an organizational leader then?
Well, of course, it's not always roses and sunshine, is it? But it really has changed. It has changed the workplace. It's changed the culture, and I think that we have the data to see that. And remember, I'm an early childhood educator, so data is not sort of it's not my thing, but it is now. I now have. I have something very visual that I can watch change over a period of time. So we've surveyed the employees every 6 months since the fall of 2021. And in looking at, we're just about ready to receive our newest data for April of 2024. Kate knows what it is already, but I haven't seen it yet. I saw a snippet. So I do know, we were talking about, well-being scores. I know that our well-being score from 2021 to 2024 has improved by 7 points. And that maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but you're talking about 179 to 180 employees that certainly have changed as well. We know that 46% of our employees have less than 3 years of experience with our organization. So the fact that we're still recovering from the Great Resignation, and at the same time, we're improving workplace culture. That's big. You look at our performance. You talked about the performance score. I know that our performance score has improved 8 points since 2021. And there's been dips. It's dipped and it's come back and it's dipped, but it never dips to the level that it was in 2021. So there is still continued growth. And then something, Kate, I don't think you've talked about yet is the Net Promoter Score. And I think that's perhaps the one that I'm the most pleased to see, the one that sort of spurs the interest in continuing this and knowing that the work is valuable. That score went up, has gone up 26 points. Yeah. So that says to me, while there are still individuals on our survey data that are burnt out, Kate did talk about how we've added the burnout scoring. There are folks that are still burnt out, but they still think that we're a great place to work. They still see value in the work that we're doing, and they know that it will, or they foresee that it will get better.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the FlourishDX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the FlourishDX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Okay, so you've unpacked a lot of great things, and I'm just torn on which way to go. So we're going to keep this kind of high level before we dive into a lot of the details. So you're collecting a lot of data that should also predict then to things like turnover, intention, right? Do people want to stay with the organization if they're saying that, yeah, I'd recommend this as a great place to work? And certainly people change roles and people change jobs and things like that, but it should speak to some of those bigger HR outcomes that we would look at in terms of turnover, in terms of the length of with the organization. Are you seeing some improvements in some of those other indicators, Christine?
We certainly do see improvements. And I think that the nice thing about the survey that is done here is, so we have 9 childcare centers. So it's not just one childcare center, there are 9. And so with the data, we can pull out the data to have a look and see which centers are performers and which centers do we need to focus on. So, I often say, 10% of the population require 100% of my time. But that 10% needs 100% of my time. And if I focus my time on that, then we will see improvements. So it doesn't mean that the centers that aren't performing or the centers that are showing, great workplace culture, it doesn't mean that we don't focus on that. But there is a narrative about that. The centers that have great well-being or have positive well-being scores and positive performance scores, there has been less turnover. There is a story there that we can pull out from what we're seeing. And so I do tend to focus on the bottom half of the centers, perhaps the bottom tier of maybe 3. But our turnover rate is improving, and we have different ways of collecting that information as well.
So then another outcome then that we would expect to see logically is that you've talked about, if you create a great work environment, you're going to be having early childhood educators then that are doing a great job of educating children. So do you see, and we would talk about leading and lagging indicators, do you see then changes in perhaps the satisfaction of your families or You're probably not measuring SAT scores, 12 years later or anything like that. But do you see some payoffs then in terms of the impact on the families that you're serving?
Yeah, I'm going to let Kate jump in on that, but I think one of the things that we focus on is the work environment. So the workplace culture for the educator is the learning environment for the child. It is also the well-being relationship for the family. So imagine the family is dropping off their most prized child. That's a big deal to drop your child off in childcare for someone, for that period of time. As early as 12 months, of age. And so families have to have well-being and trust as well. And so this is why it's so important that we do focus on the workplace culture for the educators, because it is the learning environment for the children. And Kate has data on that as well.
All right, go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to talk about that first piece, Christine, where you were like, that people are dropping off. I can equate it to taking your heart out of your body and leaving that heart with someone else for the day, right? Like it really is. And Kyle's full in that stage right now with, I'm a little bit beyond the early childhood education, but I can't emphasize enough how important this sector is, and that the people who do this incredibly, incredibly valuable work deserve to be well. And so one of the things that we've just done at YMCA Workwell is actually a national survey around a group of employees, including childhood educators. And we looked at both the employee experience and we also looked at the parent experience or the family experience. What we found was that the family experiences, the scores are super high. They're really, really high. So families are reporting that they're having really tremendous, fabulous experiences with the childcare centers. And then we also get to see the data of the employee experience, and we get to see the levels of burnout, and we get to see how people are feeling. And so for me, that story is one of these people are doing heroic work at their own expense, and it's not sustainable, right? And that's what we hear when we talk to early childhood educators, to leaders of childcare centers, etc. The levels of burnout are really high. They're really high. And so for us, that's something that needs to be addressed. And of course, burnout is an organizational problem. It's not an individual problem. And so how do we come together as organizations? But also, Christine was talking about the profession. How does the profession come together and create healthy spaces for people to work and thus for children to learn and to grow?
Right. So what you're saying is nationally what you found is that, hey, people love us. The organization is doing great work. Was there any connection where you could see that, burnout was affecting the levels of service and the outcome? Because that's what we always think. We always think that employees who are well then are really really delivering great products and services, not to but to put it in that very generic language. Do you see a connection?
Yeah, so we definitely saw a correlation. So, and again, remember, this is families' reported experiences. But as we watched burnout levels go up, parents and families' reported experiences around their child's development went down. So, correlation is not causation, right? However, we're seeing that correlation there. And we saw it across, we looked at member experience and those types of things as well. And so what we found was that whether you're a family engaged in a childcare center or you're a member of an organization, as employees, burnout went up, as workload levels go up, that level of service goes down and it has an impact. People notice, right?
Okay, so you're saying that if location ABC has higher levels of burnout, those same people that are more associated with location ABC had lower experiences with it, and you could line up that data, fairly good. Now, as a PhD, person, you would have done some tests of statistical significance and whatnot.
That's right.
Are you very confident in those associations, though, those correlations that you see?
Yeah, the correlation is statistically significant.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, what you're painting a picture then is to say that all the stuff that we sort of assumed to be true that burnout would create difficulties in product delivery or in outcomes for staff and for clients served, then you're like, wow, okay, we got some data to say this is really, really important. And Christine, from being at the what we sometimes call a coal face, right? You're right there with your staff, and you're seeing the difficulty they're having on a day-to-day basis. You see that they're struggling, and of course, that affects the quality of care. So I'm really, really curious, and like Christine, as you guys, and feel free to contribute, Kate and Kyle. I know you're new in the organization, but as you started to pick apart your data and sort of start to understand it, wow, that must have been like maybe a little bit overwhelming. Or were you like, all right, let's go? Like, what was that like?
Well, I think one of the benefits of doing these surveys every 6 months is being able to see what things line up under the workload stressors. And so we have this fantastic data that tells us that the workload stressor, the number one workload stressor for our employees was keeping up with the amount of work on my plate. And so we saw that in November 2022. We surveyed them again in April of 2023, and that bar did not change. It was the exact same level. And that's 6 months apart. So we, that was where we started. We pulled that piece out and said, this is where we start. And so we created a working group. We chose one educator from each age group. So we have infant, toddler, preschool, and school age. And within 5 meetings of this group, we had identified our top 2 sort of problematic areas or things that were creating this workload burden. So we did the impact effect matrix. We found sort of our top 5. And one of the things that we found, one of the big problems that we found was actually out of scope for this working group. It was in my scope. It wasn't within scope for our early childhood educators, because remember, they're all frontline employees. But one of the key drivers, which they put in the, I think, tough to do but big rewards, and said it was out of scope, was fully in my scope of work. And so that's really where I've dug in for the last year, with sort of those pieces that aren't, lunchtime yoga and pizza parties. There is value in those. Don't get me wrong. Early childhood educators love dinner during their staff meetings. It is one of their appreciation languages. But it isn't the thing that was going to fix their workload challenges and the amount of work that they have on their plate.
So without being, too like divulging confidential information about your organization, when you said it was something that was within your scope, they identified it. And can you share with us what that was, or the nature of that was a ball that you clearly had to sort of pick up as being out of scope or management?
Yeah, for sure. It was really reflective of the turnover. So the 46% new employees, or the employees that have less than 3 years of experience, and the things that group needed. So that group needed a certain set of things, but also our long-term employees needed similar things, because what we have is the newest employees are saying, I have questions. I don't want to burden all of these people that are working so hard and are so busy. I don't want to burden them with my questions. And then the long-term folks were saying, I'm really feeling burdened by so many new employees that don't have the experience. And so one of the things that we did was we enhanced our orientation. So orientation for early childhood educators would have been, come sign all kinds of paperwork, and then we send you off, and you have the experience because you did your diploma program, and away you go. Well, we enhanced that orientation so that it is now a full day. New employees come, they do all their paperwork. I say in childcare, we do so much paperwork. It's like you're buying a car. Do you know that feeling of how much paperwork you sign when you buy a car? Except for they don't get a car, they get a job, which is fantastic. And then we send them off to the childcare center they're going to be working at, and we pay them for that time. So they spend a half day at the childcare center where they're going to be working, and that gets the nervousness out, the jitters out. They meet their colleagues, but they're not, childcare is ratio based. So they're not in ratio. The other thing that we did was I created a number of orientation videos, just little short videos, put them on our employee hub. Things like how to read your paycheck. Not everybody knows how to read a paycheck. Not everybody understands accruals and how that equals vacation time and sick time. So I did a number of videos, and we get lots of hits on those videos. Those are working out really well. The latest one that I'm working on now is called How to Work Smarter, Not Harder. And that will be up on our employee hub shortly. Then we spent a lot of time developing our leadership team. And I don't have a young leadership team. That's not where the turnover has happened. We have an employee that has been with us for 40 years. So I don't have a young leadership team. But we did need to spend some time. And one of the most valuable things we did was coaching, executive coaching hours. And Kate and other employees from YMCA Workwell spend time just talking at an executive level with our supervisors. So really investing in that time. And we did the language of appreciation, the power of disconnecting, how to build community. Did a lot of work around true colors, and sort of understanding how our personality impacts how we engage with others. So for the frontline employees, it can be challenging because we talk a lot about YMCA Workwell, but really the people that we're working the most with would be the leadership team, and hoping that actually trickles down to our employees, which then trickles down to our children and families.
Okay, so Kate, when you look at that side of it, so you've heard Christine, talking about the activities that they undertook and that they started to do. What was your sort of take on that process? You're involved in it as well.
Yeah, so we do really love to start at that leadership level because leaders do have such an influence over what the day-to-day experience of work is like. And so Christine has just such a fabulous team of leaders, which is it's so wonderful to get to work with them. And we did a lot of learning and development opportunities, so workshops as an entire leadership team to talk about some of the key challenges or areas that Rising Oaks had identified for improvement. And then we did go down into some whole staff training. We took over Camp Kauai a couple of times for a full day and did some retreats up there, again, working with all of the staff and helping them to understand the role that they play, because culture's co-created, right? And I talk about this all the time with leaders. You have an influence and you have a strong influence, and so that really matters, but you don't do it all by yourself. And so that piece around how do you involve your team in making the change that you want to see. If you want your work experience to be different, then everybody needs to pitch in to make that happen. And part of it is having that common understanding of what are our values? What do we want our work experience to be like? And what personal responsibility do I have for being the type of person that I want to work with? And so I think all of those pieces are so important. And as Christine mentioned, that 1-to-1 coaching or the 2-to-1 coaching, right, where we're working with a particular leadership team around their center and thinking about the specific challenges that their center is facing in that safe space to just say, like, I actually don't really know how to fix this. And having some space held for, okay, what might you do? And what are you going to try? And then we're going to check in next time we connect and say, how did that go? What did we learn from that? What's next that we're going to try? I just really appreciate how deeply Christine and her team have been willing to invest in their people at all levels inside the organization to start to make this change a reality. And we can see it being borne out in the numbers. At the end of the day, the measures are just to track the progress, right? The real work happens in the in-between with what do we do with this data? How do we make informed decisions about what we're going to do?
Right. So Christine and your team have been doing the hard work.
Oh, yeah.
You've set this up now. It's a cliffhanger. What's the new workload data say? You had a survey in April 2023. What does the new data say 6 months after that?
Do you want me to share, Christine? I've got
For
got
sure.
that.
For sure. I want you to share. But before we do that, you touched on something, Kate, I think that's really important, which is we didn't just bring our top leaders, right? We didn't just bring senior leadership, and we just didn't bring supervisors. We brought assistant supervisors along on the journey. And that is that planning for the future, because for those that know about childcare, that assistant supervisor is actually the in-between person. The frontline educators have a very different relationship with the assistant supervisor than they do with the supervisor. And so I think that was really key as well. And that we are setting the foundation for future leadership, right? So that we don't have to keep redoing this. We are creating that healthy environment sort of all the way down the pipe. But yes, Kate, I would love to hear more about our 2024 data and what that actually says.
Yeah, so I was taking a look as we were prepping for today and looking at how the workload scores have changed since 2021 to literally today. And so they have gone down by 10 points in that time. So from a score that was at the high end of at risk in our language to a score that's actually healthy now. Which is amazing to see. And stress management in the same time went from, it was even lower. It was at the low end of adequate, and at the low end of at risk, and it's now up in the adequate space. So there's been a 9-point difference there since we started to where we are now. And I think when we take a look at burnout scores as well, so 20% of Christine's team right now are sharing that they are experiencing burnout often or extremely often. To put that in context, in our national sample around childcare, it's a third. So there's a significant difference there. And when we take a look at childcare leaders, it's actually 43% are reporting burnout often or extremely often. And that is not the case in Christine's organization. It's far lower than that. So it's when you get to start to see some of those benchmark pieces that you really realize this is making a big difference. And in the broader community data, what I've seen recently is burnout being shared at somewhere between 25% and 38% based on this study, right? So that's what's being reported right now. So 20%, it's still 1 in 5, right? We care deeply about that 1 in 5 who are continuing to experience burnout. And Christine and her team are continuing to lean in really hard there to support people. But compared to what we're seeing in childcare particularly, but even in the broader community, they've been successful.
Wow. Is this the first time you're hearing the new numbers, Christine?
It is the first time I'm hearing about the burnout numbers. I did know about some of our well-being and our net promoter score, but it's that burnout piece that I often focus on as well. And so that's an exciting number. When I'm quickly reflecting on some of the things that we've done that might have supported that positive changes, and why our leadership team is maybe doing as well as they are is one of the things that we've been sort of charting recently is how much time that leadership team is spending in the classroom. Because really their job is administrative. They shouldn't be in the classroom as much as they were. And we've been charting that now for a full year and made some real strategic decisions about how to eliminate the need for them to be in program as much as they are. And so that really leads to that burnout piece. And you can see that they would be burned out if they are having to be in program, helping to maintain ratios, but also have all the administrative responsibilities of families and staff needing them. So this is more wonderful data to present to our board of directors and identify that the strategic approaches that we've been doing are really really working. So
Wow, wow. And I really feel like, we're so privileged to be on the front line and hear this. It's almost like, this was one of those home improvement shows where, the people haven't seen the house that's been renovated and you say, move the bus, and wow. All right. So and I'd love to spend more time unpacking it because, of course, we for our listeners, if you're not familiar with the prevalence of burnout, burnout in the Mental Health Research Canada last December pegged burnout in a lot of the service occupations, so personal care support workers in home care, people working in healthcare and childcare. It said burnout was around 45 to 55%, right? So to hear those numbers nationally in the national survey, that's sort of in keeping with the data. To see the numbers that have changed at your childcare facilities, Christine, is amazing. It is amazing. And sorry, go ahead.
no, it feels almost like about like lifting weights at the gym. Woo, we've
Yeah.
we've tackled it. We've done an overhead press.
Yeah. So I'm sort of curious. Talking with people, taking people on a retreat, having leaders in the classrooms more, providing orientation. That was sort of the means. That was sort of the activities that you did. Were they costly? Did you change ratios or did you add staff? Was this a costly venture for you?
Well, everything comes at a cost, right? But you can either spend the money or you risk the human capital cost. And we were watching what the human capital cost was, and knowing that our employees are working with the most vulnerable sector. We know that the most significant brain development happens between 0 and 5. That's our group. That's our niche. Those are the children we're working with. So it wasn't only the human capital cost on our workforce, it was the human capital cost on our children and families. And so when I say strategic decisions, we did make some strategic decisions to spend some money. And so spending money looked like making sure that we had, we call them a float educator. I'd like to find a new word for that, but that is an in-house casual employee. So not someone that we call off of a list. Remember, our work doesn't sit on the desk if someone is sick. We have to have an employee there. So we hired at every one of our locations at least one float educator. So that's a person that doesn't have a room assignment, but if someone calls in sick, then that's where they go to work. And at our large childcare centers, we have 2 floats. So that was a cost. We also aimed to reduce split shifts. So a split shift is somebody who comes to work from say 6:30 to 9 and works with the school age group. And then they come back and they work from 2:30 to 6. Some people love that shift. There are people who make that work. That helps with their resiliency. They're great at spending their time in that in between, and others it just doesn't work for them. So we eliminated that. But again, in order to do that, that came at a cost of each time we did that about $40,000. So, but again, I could burn out our entire educator population and our human resources manager with revolving door recruitment, or we could spend the money and make some strategic decisions. And so we made the strategic decisions to invest in our employees in that way.
Right. So, because we often talk about sometimes interventions are cost avoidance, that if we do this, we're going to avoid, some turnover costs. And, or if we do this, we're going to train people better, but we might not see that reflected. So by implementing these floats and eliminating split shifts or avoiding split shifts, can you actually say that turnover is down?
Yes, I absolutely can. I just gathered that data the other day. We started tracking turnover in sort of a more concrete way in 2022, but I missed a quarter, so I only have data from Q2, 3, and 4 in 2022. But it is down probably about 7 or 8 people from 2022 to 2023. But remember, I'm also missing a quarter. So I missed a full quarter there, and I am still down in turnover.
Right. All right. So as we were preparing for this episode, Kate and I were talking, and we're like, we have a ton of great insights to bring to people, but people got to take it in, bite-sized modules. So we're just coming up to almost an hour here. And so I think we're going to split this episode into 2. But Christine, what I heard you say is that as you have started to work on some things very concretely, so you brought your survey results to the team, you gathered people from all levels of the organization, you came together and said, okay, well, what is it about workload? And you emerged from that saying, okay, well, workload does mean augmenting some staff, adding a float. It means eliminating split shifts, but it also is about training. And so it's about how do we orient people, because that was, being a resource for both your brand new people, but then also your experienced people. And so it wasn't that you imagined in the office, oh, I talked with a PhD and we should do this. You went to the front line and you gathered real people who were doing the work, and they co-crafted what was going to happen. And they put a bunch of stuff on your plate as a leader to say, we really need this to make our lives better. And it's delivered. I don't want to selfishly look at it and say it's benefited your bottom line, but it's really benefited everyone. So what created a better workplace for your staff is paying off in terms of well-being. They're reporting that they are healthier and they are better. Your families are reporting a really high net promoter score that went up. They recommended, your staff recommended you as a place to work. That all sounds super. Like I don't know what else to say. It's wonderful.
It is wonderful, but we can't take our foot off the gas just yet.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to give it a wrap for this episode. And we're going to pick it up in a second episode, and we're going to dive deeper into some of those mechanisms and insights, and maybe a little bit more about how the change unfolded. There may have been some bumps along the road. I don't know what we're going to find. But so we're concluding this episode. So please tune in to the next episode when it drops. We really rely on our user base to like and share on YouTube, like the LinkedIn clips, but it's really important to spread the message that we can make work better for everyone. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And there's connection points below in the show notes that you can connect with our guests, and you can follow us and you can learn more. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kyle. Second episode, you're going to talk a lot more, Kyle, I promise. And thank you, Christine.
Great.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Canada podcast. To stay up to date with the best content on workplace mental health in North America, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and join the Flourish DX community at www.flourishdx.com.